The woman in the fog. It happened in late October, along a stretch of Highway 93 between Ely and Wells, Nevada, a road that every trucker knew was lonely, dark, and endless. My name's Tom Keller, 23 years behind the wheel, and I've seen my share of strange things on the road, but nothing like what I saw that night. The fog rolled in fast, thick as wet cement, swallowing the high beams like smoke. It was just past 2 a.m., and I hadn't seen another set of headlights for miles. I remember the temperature dropping suddenly. The dashboard clock blinked between 1:59 and 2 o'clock, and the radio gave out a hiss of static. I reached to adjust it. That's when I saw her. A woman standing right on the shoulder of the highway, dressed in a white coat that shimmered faintly in the fog. She wasn't waving for help, not moving at all, just standing there with her head slightly bowed. My first thought was that she'd been in an accident or her car broke down. Instinct kicked in. I hit the brakes, the air hissed, and my rig came to a slow stop about 20 yards ahead of her. When I climbed out, the air felt heavier than it should have. The fog was so thick it muffled everything, no crickets, no wind, no distant hum of engines. I called out, "Ma'am, are you all right?" but my voice felt like it was swallowed whole. I walked toward where I'd seen her, flashlight cutting weak circles through the mist. There was no one there. Just the fog curling around the guardrail and the silence pressing down on me. Then I saw it, a single footprint on the wet asphalt. Barefoot. Small. It led toward the slope by the trees and then stopped, as if the ground had simply decided to forget whoever made it. I looked around again, nothing. I figured maybe my eyes had played tricks on me, maybe exhaustion was catching up. I went back to the truck, still uneasy, and pulled myself into the cab. That's when I noticed something lying on the passenger seat, a faded photograph, small and old, the edges curled with age. It showed a woman standing beside a pickup truck, smiling faintly. The date printed on the corner said October 24th, 1983. My stomach tightened. I hadn't noticed that photo before. My cab was locked until I stepped out, and no one could have placed it there. I started the engine, trying to shake off the cold crawling out my back. The fog was thicker now, and every shape outside looked alive. I kept the photo on the dashboard, planning to show it to the next gas station attendant, maybe ask if someone had lost it. About 10 miles down the road, my CB radio crackled, just static at first, then a faint voice, a woman's voice whispering something I couldn't make out. It wasn't a clear transmission. I turned the dial slowly until the words surfaced through the noise. "You stopped, thank you." I froze. My hand was trembling. I didn't reply. The line went dead. By the time I reached a diner outside Wells, dawn was creeping over the mountains. I showed the photo to the waitress, an older woman who'd clearly worked there forever. She looked at it for a long second, then frowned. "Where'd you get this?" she asked. "Found it in my truck," I said. "Near mile marker 117. Her face went pale. "That's where she died," she whispered. She told me the story. A young woman had been driving to meet her husband in 1983 when her truck hit a patch of black ice and went off the road near that very mile marker. She died before anyone found her. Locals said her spirit still appeared in foggy weather, trying to stop passing drivers before they made the same mistake. Some people claimed they'd seen her standing in the same spot, wearing a white coat. Others said she appeared inside their vehicles, silently leaving a sign that she was there. I didn't want to believe in ghost stories, but I knew what I'd seen. I hadn't imagined her. In the photo, I still had it in my pocket. I handed it to the sheriff later that day when I stopped to report it. He looked at it, nodded slowly, and said, "That's her. Mary Lasker. We've heard about her from other drivers too. You're lucky you stopped. Most of the ones who keep going, they don't make it around the next curve." I asked what he meant, but he didn't elaborate. Just said quietly, "It's happened more than once. Maybe she's trying to help." On my way back east that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there in the fog, waiting for the next trucker who wouldn't see her in time. The road was empty again, and the mist had started to rise from the ditches. I kept both hands tight on the wheel. Then, just before the same stretch where it all began, my headlights flickered, once, twice, and the radio turned itself on, no static this time, just silence. The screen lit up, showing the same timestamp as the photo, October 24th, 1983. The air inside the cab grew cold enough to mist my breath. I whispered into the dark, "I saw you." I stopped. The lights steadied. The radio died again. The fog slowly lifted, revealing the road ahead, long and empty. I drove through the night without another word. The next morning, I pulled into a truck stop near Ely to get some rest. When I reached into my jacket pocket, the photograph was gone. But on the inside of the windshield, faintly written in the condensation, were 2 words, "Thank you." I wiped it away, but it left a trace like it had been etched into the glass. I've driven that same route a dozen times since. Every time the fog rolls in, I keep my eyes on the shoulder. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I still see a white figure standing there, waiting for someone to stop. The end. The gas station that wasn't there. It happened in the early winter of 2017, somewhere along Highway 95 in northern Idaho. I was hauling refrigeration units from Spokane down toward Boise, running solo on a night run that should have been routine. I'd been on the road since dusk, and by the time the snow started falling, the CB chatter had gone dead. Not unusual for that stretch, miles of pine forest, sharp turns, and a whole lot of nothing. I remember glancing at the fuel gauge around 1:40 a.m., needle just under a quarter tank. I knew there was supposed to be a gas station near mile marker 222, a place called Miller's Fuel and Food, the kind of old roadside stop that never showed up on GPS but everyone said was still open 24 hours. I'd never been there before, but I figured it'd be better to refuel than risk running dry in the cold. The snow thickened fast. Headlights could barely cut through it. The world beyond the windshield looked like static, endless, and spinning. When I finally saw the glow of a sign through the trees, dim orange letters spelling Miller's Gas and Service, it felt like relief. I pulled in slowly. The place looked like something from another decade, 2 old pumps, the kind with analog dials, under a tin awning half-collapsed from years of snow. The building behind them had fogged windows, a flickering open sign, and a single yellow light burning inside. My truck engine hummed against the silence. I turned it off, stepped down, and felt the crunch of ice under my boots. There was something strange right away, no wind, no sound, not even the ticking of cooling metal from the rig. It was like the whole place was trapped in still air. I walked to the pump, grabbed the handle, but the nozzle was heavy, stiff, like it hadn't been used in years. Still, when I clicked it, the old numbers started turning, and I heard fuel flow. I watched the digits roll, but I couldn't shake the unease. The smell was faint, not the sharp, oily scent of gas, but something musty, like old wood and dust. When I looked toward the building, I saw a figure behind the counter, an old man, thin, pale, wearing a dark shirt and suspenders. He was standing perfectly still, watching through the glass. I lifted a hand to wave, but he didn't react. Just stared. His face was expressionless, his eyes dark, like the reflection of headlights on water. After a moment, I decided to go in and pay cash, figuring maybe he was hard of hearing or just old school. The bell above the door didn't ring when I opened it. Inside, the air smelled faintly of smoke and something sweet, maybe burned coffee. Shelves stood half empty, covered with dust. Cans of motor oil, faded magazines from years back, and a rack of jerky so dry it looked fossilized. The only sound was the hum of a fluorescent light that flickered overhead. "Evening," I said, stepping closer to the counter. The man slowly looked up. His voice was dry and quiet. "You made it through the snow?" I nodded. "Yeah, roads are bad tonight." He didn't answer, just tilted his head slightly like he was listening to something else. Then he said, "Not many stop anymore." I tried a small laugh. "Guess everyone uses the new station down the interstate, huh?" He blinked once, slow, then turned his gaze toward the window, where my truck was parked. "They built that one after the fire," he murmured. Something cold passed through me, like I'd missed a step. "What fire?" He didn't reply. Just reached under the counter and placed an old receipt book on top, yellowed pages curling at the edges. I noticed the date printed on the top, December 3rd, 1998. "You're still running this place?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He looked at me then, and for a split second, his eyes caught the fluorescent light in a way that made them look glassy. "Always been here," he said softly. "Always open for travelers." I pulled a 20 from my wallet and laid it on the counter. He didn't touch it. Didn't even glance at it. Instead, he said, "Road's bad tonight. Best stay put till morning." I didn't like that. Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. "Thanks," I said quickly, "but I've got a delivery to make." He smiled faintly, or maybe just twitched. "Some roads never lead where you think." That was enough. I backed away, nodded, and pushed out the door. The cold air hit hard, and the snow had slowed to a fine mist. I climbed into the cab, fired up the engine, and checked the mirrors. For a second, I thought I saw him still standing behind the window, watching me. Then the lights of the station flickered, once, twice, and went out completely. Only the glow of my headlights remained, cutting across the pumps and the sign. I drove off, feeling my chest tighten, every instinct screaming to get distance between me and that place. When I hit the main road again, I glanced at the clock, 1:52 a.m. Only 12 minutes had passed. My tank read full, the receipt from the pump lying on the passenger seat. But the date printed on it was the same as the one on that old book, December 3rd, 1998. By dawn, I reached a way station near Riggins and told another driver about it, a guy named Dale who'd run those same routes for 30 years. He gave me a strange look. "You're saying Miller's?" he asked. "Yeah. Little place off 95. 2 pumps, old sign. You know it?" He frowned. "Buddy, that place burned down years ago. Owner fell asleep with a heater on. Whole station went up. Killed him and his kid. They built a new one 10 miles down." I told him that wasn't possible, I'd just been there, talked to someone. He didn't believe me, so he pulled out a map. The spot I'd marked, right near mile marker 222, showed nothing. Just forest. I figured maybe exhaustion had made me hallucinate, but when I looked down later, I still had the receipt in my pocket, the ink faded, but clear enough to read. Miller's Gas and Service. Fuel total, $46.17. Date, December 3rd, 1998. That night, in my motel room, I laid the receipt on the nightstand. I kept telling myself there was an explanation, maybe a replica station, some forgotten outpost still running on backup power. But then I noticed something that froze me. At the bottom of the receipt, under the total, someone had written in pencil, "Drive safe, Tom." I hadn't told that man my name. The next evening, curiosity got the better of me. I rerouted the trip north to pass the same area. No snow this time, sky clear, road dry. I slowed down where the turnoff should have been. There was no sign, no lights, no awning, just trees and an old foundation half buried in weeds. I parked on the shoulder and got out. The air was warmer, still. No sound but the rustle of dry pine. I walked to where the pumps had stood, or should have. Just 2 concrete pads cracked with age, and a faint smell of soot rising from the ground. Near one of the slabs, something metallic caught the sunlight. I knelt and picked it up, a fuel cap, scorched black. Etched faintly on the side was a name, M. Miller. When I got back to my truck, the cab was colder than it should have been. The dashboard clock blinked 1:40 a.m., though it was mid-afternoon. I tried to reset it, but it froze, digits flickering, December 3rd, 98. That night I stayed in a truck stop diner, avoiding the route completely. An older waitress noticed the map on my table and asked what stretch I was running. When I mentioned Highway 95 near the burn station, her smile faded. "I worked there once," she said quietly. "Before the fire. Mr. Miller was a good man. Never should have been open that night. Gas leak started in the basement. They found him behind the counter, still standing. I asked her what she meant. She stared at the window for a long moment, then said, "He always said, if someone needed help in a storm, he'd stay open no matter what." I guess he meant it. Later, when I finally went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing just outside the motel window. I got up once, checked, nothing. But on the glass, traced faintly in frost, were 3 letters drawn by a fingertip, MGS. Miller's Gas and Service. The next week, I sent the receipt to a friend in Boise who collects roadside memorabilia, just to see if it matched any old prints. He called me 2 days later, uneasy. "Tom," he said, "this paper, it's not new. It's thermal stock. They stopped using this kind in the 90s. And there's smoke damage along the edge. You sure you didn't pick it up from some collector's shop?" I told him no. I'd filled my tank with it. I'd watched the numbers move. He paused. "Well, whatever it is, you might want to stay off that stretch for a while." I agreed. But last month, when I passed through Idaho again, my curiosity betrayed me. I flipped on the CB radio near the same area. For a few seconds, through static, I heard a faint voice, the same tone, calm and dry. "Road's bad tonight. Best stay put till morning." Then silence. I looked out at the dark tree line as I drove past the spot where the station once stood. Snow was falling again, light, slow flakes swirling under my headlights. And for the briefest moment, just before the turn disappeared behind me, I saw a flicker of yellow light between the trees. I didn't stop this time. But in my mirror, through the swirl of snow, I could have sworn I saw the faint outline of a tin awning, and the ghostly orange glow of letters that spelled Miller's Gas and Service, before the darkness took it all away. The end. The truck stop whisper. It happened in late March of 2021, just outside Amarillo, Texas. I'd been driving for nearly 14 hours, hauling produce from California to Missouri. It was one of those nights where the sky looked bruised, heavy with a storm that never came. By the time I pulled into a rest area off I-40, my eyes burned, and the wind was howling through the flatlands like something alive. The truck stop was almost empty. A few rigs sat scattered under flickering sodium lights, their engines idling low, the kind of sound that becomes part of your heartbeat after so many years on the road. I parked near the back, far from the diner, killed the engine, and let the silence settle. It was 2:17 a.m. according to the dashboard clock. I leaned back in the seat, cracked the window an inch for air, and closed my eyes. The hum of distant tires and the whisper of the wind were all I heard for a while. Then the CB radio, which I always kept on channel 19, gave a faint crackle, soft at first, almost like someone brushing the microphone. I didn't pay attention, stray static isn't rare at night. But then came a voice. A man's voice. "Don't sleep on that line, move your truck." The words were calm, almost polite, but something about the tone chilled me. I sat up straight, grabbed the mic, and asked, "Come again?" No reply. Just static. I glanced around, the other rigs were still, no headlights, no movement. I could see one driver sitting behind the wheel of a Peterbilt near the diner, reading by the glow of his phone. He didn't seem to be talking on his radio. "Breaker 19, who's on this channel?" I tried again. Silence. Then, faintly, the same voice, closer this time, "You shouldn't sleep there. Not on that strip." I felt my stomach tighten. "Why not?" I asked. The radio hissed for a long second before the reply came, so soft I almost didn't hear it. "Watch the lights." I turned my eyes toward the far end of the lot, where the sodium lamp nearest the exit flickered weakly. It pulsed twice and then died completely, leaving that stretch of pavement in darkness. The other lamps buzzed faintly, but the rest area suddenly felt much smaller. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a prank. Maybe a bored driver messing around. Still, I started the engine, figuring I'd move a few spaces closer to the diner just to shake off the nerves. As soon as the truck rolled forward, my radio burst alive again. "You're good now," the voice said quietly. That time, it wasn't static, it was clear. Close. Almost inside the cab. I slammed the volume down and froze, staring at the mic like it might move. My pulse was pounding so hard I could hear it. I parked under the working lights near the diner and climbed out to stretch. The cold hit my face like glass. That's when I noticed a faint burning smell, like hot rubber, coming from the far end of the lot where I'd been parked moments ago. Then, the sound of an engine revving wildly, headlights cutting across the dark. Another semi roared into the lot, moving too fast. Its tires screeched as it jackknifed straight through the space I'd just vacated, smashing into a light post with a metal scream that shook the ground. The impact was brutal. I ran toward it, heart hammering, shouting for help. By the time I reached the wreck, the cab was crumpled. Diesel was leaking onto the asphalt, and the driver, an older man, maybe late 50s, was slumped forward, motionless. A couple of other truckers ran over with extinguishers, trying to keep the fuel from catching fire. I dialed 911, my hands shaking. Within minutes, the whole stop was lit with flashing red and blue lights. The paramedics worked quietly, but I could tell by their faces that the man hadn't made it. One of the troopers asked where my truck had been parked. When I told him, he stared at me. "Lucky you moved," he said. He came in straight from the ramp, no braking marks, nothing. If you'd still been there, you'd both be gone. As they cleared the scene, I went back to my rig and sat in silence. The CB mic hung loose, the cord swaying slightly with each gust of wind. I picked it up, switched channels, and back again. Nothing but static. An hour later, a tow truck pulled the wreckage out. The spot where the other rig had crashed was scorched black, the asphalt cracked from the impact. When the lot emptied again, I saw something glinting near the damaged light post, a small, handheld CB mic, its casing half melted. I walked over, crouched, and saw a tag etched into the side, call sign, Ray 119. Back in the cab, curiosity got the better of me. I checked the logbook on my passenger seat. The date and time matched the accident almost exactly, and on my last line entry, where I'd written rest stop, 2:17 a.m., there was a faint smear of ash across the ink, like a finger had brushed over it. The next morning, when I stopped for coffee, I told another driver what had happened. He stared for a long time before saying, "You heard Ray? He's been dead 3 years." According to him, Ray was a veteran trucker who'd died at that same rest area, same stretch of asphalt, same lane, after dozing off in his cab and getting hit by a runaway rig. Some said his radio still picked up faint transmissions on foggy nights. A warning to anyone parked where he died. That night, as I continued east, I kept my CB off for the first time in years. The road was quiet, black and empty ahead of me. Around 3 a.m., as I crossed the state line, I turned it on again out of habit. Static filled the cab. Then, through the white noise, a whisper, "Keep moving." I didn't reply. I didn't breathe. The static faded. I drove until dawn without stopping. 2 days later, passing Amarillo again, I saw on the local radio news that the truck stop had been shut down for repairs. They'd found the underground wiring near the old lights burned through, 'cause unknown. I still keep the melted mic in my toolbox. Every time I hold it, I feel that same low hum through the metal, like it's alive. And every time I park at night, I make sure to stay away from the far end of any lot. Because somewhere out there, on Channel 19, a voice still whispers warnings to drivers too tired to listen. The end. The Hitchhiker with No Face. It happened in early September of 2019, along a quiet stretch of Route 160 outside Durango, Colorado. The night was clear, the moon sharp as glass above the mountains, and I was hauling a half-loaded trailer east toward Kansas. I'd been driving since sunset, windows cracked open to keep myself awake, the smell of pine and asphalt mixing in the cold air. Around 12:30 a.m., just past the old mining turnoff, my headlights picked up movement ahead, a figure standing on the shoulder, one hand raised. I slowed instinctively. It was a man, maybe mid-30s, wearing a dark jacket and jeans, his head tilted slightly toward the ground like he was exhausted. There was no car in sight, no lights, nothing but the hum of my engine. I rolled down the passenger window as I pulled alongside him. "You all right, buddy?" I called out. He didn't answer. Just nodded once and pointed down the road. Something about his stance struck me, still, almost rigid, like every movement was deliberate. He looked stranded, and it was a cold night in the mountains. Against my better judgment, I hit the brakes and unlocked the passenger door. "Hop in," I said. He climbed up slowly, the cab light flickering over him for only a second before I shut the door. His clothes looked damp, like he'd walked through dew or fog. He carried no bag, no phone, nothing but a kind of quiet presence that filled the cab. I asked, "You heading east?" He nodded again. His voice, when it came, was low and flat. "Just down the road." I put the truck back in gear. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of silver, empty except for the faint line of the mountains behind us. For the first few miles, neither of us spoke. I could feel him beside me, motionless, hands on his knees, staring out the window. "You from around here?" I tried. Silence. "You got a breakdown somewhere?" He turned his head toward me then, slowly. I only caught a glimpse of his face in the glow from the dashboard, but something about it didn't look right. The light seemed to slide off it, like water off glass. His features were faint, blurred somehow, as if my eyes couldn't focus on them. I looked away, telling myself I was tired, my vision playing tricks. "We'll hit a service station in about 15 miles, I said. He didn't reply. The only sound was the steady rumble of the diesel and the wind against the mirrors. A few minutes later, I noticed the temperature in the cab had dropped. My breath hung faintly in front of me. I checked the heater, still running fine. Then he spoke again, so softly I barely heard it. "You shouldn't stop on that road." I frowned. "What road?" He didn't answer. He just turned back toward the window, and I swear I saw condensation spreading across the glass near his face, like frost forming in a perfect circle. I glanced at the rearview mirror, but there were no headlights behind us, no sign of anyone else on the road. 5 more miles passed in silence. Then the man said, "You can let me off here." We were in the middle of nowhere, just pines, the slope of the hill, and the faint outline of a guardrail. "You sure?" I asked. He nodded. I eased the truck onto the shoulder, hit the hazards, and turned toward him. But the seat beside me was empty. For a moment, I couldn't move. The door was still closed, the handle untouched. The passenger seat belt hung limp. I leaned over, half expecting to find him crouched by the footwell, but there was nothing. Just the damp imprint of a body on the seat and a faint, wet smell in the air, rain, or maybe river water. I stepped out of the cab, the night so quiet it rang in my ears. The road behind me stretched empty. I shone my flashlight toward the treeline, no movement. The dirt at the shoulder was soft, and I expected to see footprints leading away, but there were none. Just tire marks in my own boots. I stood there for a long time before climbing back in and locking both doors. My pulse was hammering as I pulled onto the road again. 20 minutes later, I reached a gas station near Bayfield. The kid behind the counter gave me a look. "You all right, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." I told him what happened. He didn't smile. Just leaned on the counter, thoughtful. "You picked someone up near the pass, didn't you?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "Mile marker 82. He nodded. "You're not the first. Guy drowned out there 5 years back. His truck went off the road during a storm. Folks say he still tries to hitch a ride down the mountain. Never makes it past the turn." I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off. "You telling me I just gave a ghost a lift?" He didn't answer. Just pointed at my sleeve. There was a faint smear of dirt on it, red clay, wet, like it had come from the riverbank. When I got back in the truck, I checked the passenger seat again. The damp spot was still there. I touched it with my fingers, freezing cold. My mirror caught movement outside the window, a reflection of someone walking past the rear of my trailer. I spun around, heart racing, but the lot was empty. I didn't stop again until sunrise. At a diner near Pagosa Springs, I met another driver I'd known for years. Over coffee, I mentioned the hitchhiker. His face went pale. "You saw him too," he said. "Happened to me in 17. Picked him up same place. Didn't last 5 miles before he was gone." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a folded photo, a newspaper clipping. "Local trucker found dead in river," the headline read. Below it, the picture of a man in a dark jacket, mid-30s. The same build. The same stillness. I studied the photo. Something about the face looked faint, almost faded, like the print couldn't hold it clearly. That night, I passed that stretch again. The road was empty, the air heavy with fog. I slowed instinctively near mile marker 82. For a brief moment, my headlights caught a figure on the shoulder, a man standing with his head bowed, arms slightly raised. I didn't stop this time. But as I drove past, the passenger window fogged over again, and through the mist, a faint outline of a hand pressed against the glass, 5 fingers, leaving marks that slowly faded as the heater kicked in. I drove until dawn, not daring to look at the seat beside me. The end. The CB Channel 19. It happened in late November of 2020, on Highway 287, somewhere between Wichita Falls and Amarillo, Texas. The sky was black, the kind of pitch-dark night where even the stars seemed swallowed by dust. I'd been hauling livestock feed for nearly 12 hours straight, running solo, just trying to make it to a rest stop before midnight. It was quiet, too quiet, and my CB radio, which I always kept tuned to Channel 19, was nothing but soft static. Around 11:47 p.m., the silence broke. A voice came through the radio, sharp, urgent, and cracking with panic. "Breaker 19, can anyone hear me? Somebody's on me, tailing me with no lights. Please, anyone, come back." I grabbed my mic instinctively. "Copy that, driver. You okay? Where you at?" Static swallowed the reply for a moment, then his voice returned, trembling, strained. "Northbound 287, mile marker 106. Been following me 10 miles. No headlights, no horn, nothing. I can't." The transmission cut off with a burst of white noise. I looked down at my GPS. I was near marker 92. 14 miles south. My gut told me to keep driving, but something about his tone, that raw fear, made it impossible to ignore. I pressed the pedal and pushed up to 70, eyes scanning the dark ribbon of asphalt ahead. For 5 minutes, the channel stayed silent. Then came the voice again, barely audible. "It's still back there, closer now." I asked for his handle, but all I got was static and heavy breathing. Then, faintly, "No plates, can't see a face." Another burst of noise, like the mic being dropped. When I reached mile marker 106, the road was empty except for tire marks veering toward the shoulder. I slowed down, headlights sweeping across the brush, and saw it, the faint reflection of chrome deep in the ditch. A truck. Rolled on its side. I pulled over and jumped out. The cold wind hit hard, cutting through my jacket. I scrambled down the embankment, flashlight shaking in my hand. The wrecked semi was still smoldering, engine ticking as it cooled. The driver's side door was open. Inside, no one. But the CB radio was still on. The channel light glowed faint green, mic dangling, faint static crackling through the night. "Hello?" I said quietly, not expecting an answer. Then, through the speaker, the same voice. "Come now." "You came." I froze. The sound wasn't echoing from inside the cab. It was coming through my own radio, still powered up in my truck above the road. I backed away, heart hammering, and climbed back up the embankment. My rig sat idling on the shoulder, headlights cutting into the dark. Inside, the CB hissed again, the voice faint but clear. "Don't look back." I turned anyway. The wreck below was burning now, orange flames licking through the cabin, smoke rising in the cold night air. But what made me stumble backward was what I saw just past the fire, another truck, unmarked, sitting on the opposite side of the road. No headlights. Just a silhouette. I blinked, and it was gone. I hit the road again, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I radioed the highway patrol and gave them the coordinates, told them there'd been an accident. They said units were on the way. 20 minutes later, I stopped at a diner outside Vernon to calm down. The waitress, an older woman who'd been working night shifts for years, poured me coffee and asked if I was all right. I told her what I'd heard, the distress call, the crash, the unmarked truck. She set the pot down slowly. "You said Channel 19? "Yeah," I said. Her face went pale. "That's the same call they got a few years back. Same stretch of highway. Driver named Lee Price, he crashed in a storm, swore something followed him with no lights. His last transmission came through on 19, begging for help." I didn't know what to say. I just stared at the steam rising from my cup. The next morning, I stopped at the sheriff's office in Wichita Falls to make a report. The deputy who took my statement checked the log, frowned, and said, "We got a call about a fire on 287 last night." But when they got there, there was nothing. No wreck, no debris, not even skid marks. "You sure you saw it?" I left without answering. 2 days later, I went back over the route, in daylight this time. At mile marker 106, the asphalt was clean. No signs of a crash. But just beyond the shoulder, I found something glinting in the grass, a cracked CB microphone with L. Price scratched into the side. That night, when I turned my radio back on, Channel 19 was silent at first. Then, faintly, I heard breathing. Slow, steady. I didn't say a word. After a few seconds, a man's voice whispered through the static. "Don't stop. Keep going." I switched off the radio and drove through the night, the same words echoing in my head. Every trucker knows Channel 19 is for open road talk, weather, police, breakdowns, jokes to pass the time. But sometimes, late at night, when the air's cold and the road's empty, the static carries something else. I still keep that cracked mic in the glove box, and every time I drive past mile marker 106, I hear faint interference for a few seconds, just enough to know someone's still trying to reach out. And when the static fades, it always ends the same way. A whisper, soft as breath. "You came." The end. The tunnel that loops. It happened in February of 2018, somewhere in the mountains of West Virginia, a stretch of Route 219 between Elkins and Marlinton. The snow was thick, heavy enough that it muffled the sound of my own tires. I was hauling construction equipment to a mining site, running behind schedule because of the weather. The route my GPS chose wasn't one I recognized, but it promised a shortcut through the hills. I didn't question it, that was my first mistake. By the time I realized how remote it was, there was no signal, no radio, and not another set of headlights behind me. It was just before 1 a.m. when the road narrowed to a single lane bordered by cliffs and dark pines. Then I saw the sign, Old Briar Tunnel, use caution. The paint was faded, but the letters were clear. The tunnel entrance looked ancient. Stone arch, black mouth, and a faint shimmer of ice along the ceiling. My headlights barely reached the middle. I hesitated, but the snow behind me made turning around impossible. I downshifted, gripped the wheel, and rolled forward. The sound changed instantly. My tires echoed, the engine hum deepened, and the world outside disappeared. Inside, the walls dripped with water, forming small rivulets that caught the light and glowed like veins. The air grew colder, so cold that my breath fogged up the windshield even with the defroster on. Halfway through, I lost the GPS entirely. The map froze, showing nothing but a gray void. Then the radio flickered alive with faint static, no channel, no music, just a whisper of noise. I leaned forward, trying to see the end of the tunnel, but it never seemed to get closer. Minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. I glanced at the odometer. I'd gone over 5 miles. The tunnel wasn't supposed to be more than a quarter of one. My stomach twisted. I slowed to 30, squinting ahead, and that's when I noticed something that made the hair rise on my neck. There was light behind me. Headlights. I hadn't seen anyone enter. The glow was distant but growing stronger, reflecting off the wet walls in 2 perfect circles. I grabbed the CB mic and called out, "Southbound rig inside Briar Tunnel, who's behind me?" No response. The lights got closer. Too close. Whoever it was, they weren't slowing down. I could feel my pulse in my throat. I pressed harder on the accelerator, the truck roaring in the tight space, sound bouncing back so loud it felt like it was coming from all directions. But the lights stayed with me, steady, bright, unblinking. Then my radio burst with static again, followed by a faint voice. "You shouldn't be here." The sound came from my own speaker, flat and cold. I shouted, "Who is this?" No reply. I pushed faster. The tunnel began to curve slightly to the right, and for a second, I thought I saw an exit, a faint patch of moonlight ahead. I floored it, heart pounding, the headlights behind me flaring brighter until the cab was filled with white. Then, darkness. When I opened my eyes, the truck was idling. Everything was quiet. The tunnel looked the same. No headlights behind me. I checked the clock, 1:46 a.m. The engine temperature was fine, the fuel level unchanged. I'd been driving for nearly an hour, yet it felt like only minutes had passed. I put it back in gear, determined to reach daylight. After another 10 minutes, I finally saw the exit, a small rectangle of pale gray. Relief hit me like a wave. I drove out, blinked into the snow light, and pulled to the side of the road to breathe. The world outside looked normal again, the same forest, the same falling snow. But when I looked at the GPS, my stomach dropped. The map still showed me inside the tunnel. The blue arrow was frozen halfway through, unmoving. I reset it, restarted the system, nothing. The road in front of me curved slightly left, leading down the hill. I drove on, thinking I'd eventually reconnect to the main highway. But after 5 miles, the road started to narrow again. I slowed down, and that's when I saw it, the same stone arch. The same sign, Old Briar Tunnel, use caution. I stopped dead. My breath caught. I'd been driving in a loop. I turned the truck around, or tried to. The snow made the road slick, and my trailer fishtailed dangerously close to the ditch. I backed up, headlights sweeping over the trees, and in that flash, I saw something move. A shadow. Human-shaped. Standing at the tunnel entrance. It didn't walk toward me. It didn't move at all. It just stood there, watching. I honked, shouted, but it didn't react. Then my headlights flickered once, and the figure was gone. That was enough. I hit the gas, not caring which direction I took, just driving until I saw something familiar. The road twisted, climbed, and finally descended into a small valley where a single light flickered from a house. I pulled over, ran to the porch, and banged on the door. An old man answered, squinting at me through the snow. "You came through Briar?" he asked before I could speak. I nodded, shaking. "Tunnel won't end. GPS keeps freezing. What the hell's wrong with that road?" He looked past me, toward the ridge. They closed that tunnel in '78. Collapse killed 3 drivers. Road was rerouted years ago. Ain't no one drives through there anymore. I turned slowly toward my truck. The headlights illuminated nothing but the white curve of the road. No arch. No sign. No tunnel. Just falling snow. The old man stepped out onto the porch. "Whatever you saw, best let it stay buried." He closed the door before I could ask anything else. When I climbed back into my truck, the radio flickered once more. A burst of static. Then, faintly, my own voice echoed back at me, saying words I hadn't spoken aloud. "You shouldn't be here." The sound faded. The dashboard clock blinked 1 a.m., the exact time I'd first entered. To this day, I avoid mountain shortcuts, no matter what the GPS says. But sometimes, late at night, when the snow's thick and the air's cold enough to bite, I swear I can hear an engine hum faintly in the distance, steady, echoing endlessly in the dark. The end. The shadow in the rear view. It happened in late May of 2022, on Interstate 90, somewhere between Butte and Billings, Montana. The night was unusually clear, no clouds, no fog, just a wide-open stretch of black highway and my headlights cutting through the emptiness. I'd been on the road since noon, hauling a refrigerated load east, nothing out of the ordinary. It was past 1 a.m., and the only sound inside the cab was the hum of the tires and the faint rattle of loose chains in the back. I remember feeling uneasy before anything even happened. The air felt heavy, almost electric, like a storm was building, but the sky was empty. The moon hung high above the plains, bright enough to paint the road silver. My mirrors reflected nothing but darkness. Then, out of habit, I glanced into the rearview mirror and froze. There was someone walking behind the trailer. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. The figure was small in the distance, a shadow against the white line, but the shape was unmistakable, a person, walking straight down the center of the lane, keeping pace with my rig though I was doing 60. My stomach tightened. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. Still there. I turned the high beams on full and leaned forward, trying to make sense of it. The figure didn't fade. Didn't slow. Just moved in a steady rhythm, the dark outline of legs and arms swaying like they were pulled forward by invisible strings. My pulse started to rise. I tapped the brakes, watching the mirrors closely. The moment my truck began to slow, the shadow seemed to gain ground, growing larger, closer. That's when I saw it clearer. It wasn't walking on the road. It wasn't touching the pavement at all. It floated, just barely above the surface, the darkness beneath it rippling like heat. I slammed the pedal, pushing the speed up again, heart pounding. The shadow stayed right where it was, a constant distance behind me, keeping perfect pace. The CB crackled suddenly, breaking the silence. "You seeing that too?" a voice said. I grabbed the mic. "Who is this?" No response. Just static. I scanned the mirrors again. The figure was still there, closer now, almost visible in detail. It had a shape like a man, but no face, no clothes, nothing but an outline darker than night itself. Every instinct told me to pull over, but I couldn't. I just kept driving, eyes flicking from the windshield to the mirrors over and over again. For the next 20 miles, it didn't move. Didn't disappear. Just followed, silent, steady, always centered in my mirror. Then, suddenly, my radio turned on by itself. No static this time, just a low hum, followed by a whisper, "Don't look." The voice was flat, neither male nor female. I felt my blood turn cold. I turned the dial off, but the whisper came again, louder. "Don't look." The lights on the dashboard flickered. My speedometer needle jumped from 60 to 0, then back again. The engine hiccuped once, twice. Outside, the darkness seemed to thicken, swallowing the road behind me. I tried to call out again. "Breaker 19, anyone copy?" Nothing. Then, in the mirror, I saw movement. The shadow was no longer behind the trailer. It was beside it. Running. Its form blurred as it kept up with the truck, its arms long and unnaturally thin, fingers dragging along the metal like claws scraping glass. The sound made my skin crawl, a faint screeching that vibrated through the cab. I floored the accelerator, praying for the next exit. The GPS showed none for another 10 miles. My hands were slick on the wheel. The shadow's head turned toward me. I couldn't see a face, but I knew it was looking. My left mirror began to vibrate violently, the glass fogging over until I couldn't see through it. Then the right one did the same. I was blind to everything behind me. I kept my eyes forward, knuckles white. The radio flickered one last time. "Don't stop," the whisper said. When I finally reached an exit near Livingston, I took it too fast, skidding slightly before pulling into a dimly lit rest area. I killed the engine and sat there, chest heaving. The only sound was the ticking of the cooling engine. Slowly, I turned the mirrors forward to see what was behind me. Nothing. The trailer was clean, untouched, no scratches, no marks. But the air felt wrong, colder than it should have been, like something was still nearby. I climbed down from the cab, flashlight in hand, and walked the perimeter. My boots crunched over gravel, echoing loud in the stillness. When I reached the back of the trailer, I froze. There was a handprint on the door. Long, thin fingers, 5 of them, pressed into the frost like they'd burned through it. The shape was too long to be human. I ran back to the cab, locked the doors, and sat until sunrise. Later that morning, I stopped at a diner in Billings to get coffee. I told the cook what had happened. He stared for a long moment before saying quietly, "You were on the old mining stretch, weren't you? Near marker 304? I nodded. He sighed. Back in '79, a driver jackknifed there. His rig caught fire. They found the cab burned clean through, but not his body. Just his shadow burned into the asphalt behind the trailer." I didn't respond. I just stared at the reflection of my rig through the diner window. For a second, the sunlight hit the mirror, and I could have sworn I saw movement, a flicker, dark and fast, disappearing the moment I blinked. That night, when I checked my truck again, the frost on the back doors was gone. But inside the cab, on the lower corner of the windshield, I saw a faint smudge, the outline of 5 long fingers, pressed from the inside. I wiped it away. It came back the next morning. Now, every time I drive at night, I angle my rearview mirror down so I can't see what's behind me. Because once you see that shadow following your truck, you can't unsee it. And you start to wonder how long it's been there, and whether it ever really leaves. The end. The abandoned CB call. It happened in late October of 2016, along Route 2 in northern Maine, just outside a town called Howland. The air was freezing, the kind of dry cold that creeps through your gloves, and fog rolled low over the empty road. I'd been running a late-night haul of lumber, the trailer full and the miles long. The only company I had was my CB radio, tuned as always to Channel 19, the trucker's heartbeat. It was close to 2:10 a.m. when I first heard it. A voice came through the static, soft, trembling, almost broken. "Breaker 19, anyone near marker 74? I need some help. It's cold. I can't get the truck started." The sound was thin, like it was coming from miles away, but clear enough to understand. I keyed the mic. "Copy that, driver. I'm about 20 minutes out. You stuck or broke down?" There was a pause, then a faint crackle. "Both. Engine's dead. It's so cold." I frowned. "You got lights or heat?" Nothing for several seconds. Then, quietly, "No. They went out." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. I'd driven that stretch plenty, no stations, no rest stops, no houses. Just woods. If someone was stranded there, they were in serious trouble. "Stay put," I said. "Keep your hazards on if you can. I'll find you." Static hissed back. Then, faintly, a whisper, "Thank you." The signal cut out completely. I pushed the rig faster, tires humming over the frosted asphalt. The fog grew denser as I approached mile marker 74. My headlights barely reached the trees on either side. I scanned the shoulder for flashes of red or white, but there was nothing, just emptiness. Then, in the mist ahead, I saw it. A shape, a semi-truck pulled halfway off the road, one side buried in brush. Its trailer was angled, hazard lights dead, no movement inside. I slowed to a crawl, pulled over behind it, and left my engine running. The air was silent except for the idle of my truck. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down. The fog swallowed me whole the moment I stepped out. The other rig was old, an international model, paint chipped, glass frosted. I called out, "Hey driver, you in there?" No answer. I climbed the steps to the cab and knocked. The door creaked open on its own. Inside was darkness. My flashlight cut through the gloom, an open logbook on the dash, a coffee thermos, a CB mic dangling from the cord. No driver. The seat was empty, but what caught my eye was the frost. Thick, crusted frost, coating the inside of the windshield and the steering wheel. It looked like the cab hadn't been touched in years. "Hello?" I called again. From somewhere deep in the woods behind me came a faint sound, not a voice, but something like metal tapping metal. Slow. Rhythmic. I turned, scanning the tree line, but saw nothing. When I looked back into the cab, I noticed the logbook. The last entry read, October 21st, 1996, Bangor to Howland, 2:05 a.m. That was 20 years ago. My chest tightened. I leaned in and grabbed the CB mic from the dash. It was cold, too cold, like ice. I turned back toward my rig and froze. My own CB was on. The green light flickered, and through the static came the same voice. "Did you find me?" I stared at the mic in my hand. The sound wasn't coming from it. It was coming from my truck, 20 feet away. I dropped the frozen mic and ran back, boots crunching over gravel. Inside the cab, the radio hissed louder now, filling the air like breathing. "It's cold," the voice whispered again. "So cold." I turned off the power, yanked the cord. The noise didn't stop. The voice grew stronger, clearer. "Don't leave me here." I looked out the windshield. The fog outside was swirling now, moving against the wind, curling around the shape of the abandoned truck. The faint glow of my headlights made it shimmer like glass. Then, for one heartbeat, I saw a figure inside the other cab, sitting upright in the driver's seat, head turned toward me. I blinked, gone. The radio went dead. Complete silence. I didn't think. I slammed the truck into gear and pulled out, gravel spraying from under the tires. I drove until the fog broke, until the first hint of dawn cut through the trees. My hands were still shaking when I pulled into a diner outside Lincoln. An older driver at the counter saw my face and asked what happened. I told him everything. He listened quietly, then nodded slowly. "That stretch has a story," he said. Back in the 90s, a trucker froze to death after his rig stalled in a snowstorm. They didn't find him till spring. Folks still pick up his CB signal sometimes, same call every time. Same mile marker. I didn't believe him until I checked the date in the logbook again. October 21st. That was the same night. Later that day, I drove back with a trooper. The fog had lifted, the road empty. We found no truck, no sign of an accident, not even tire marks on the shoulder. But when I got home that night, I unpacked my bag, and there, at the bottom, was a CB microphone I didn't recognize. Old, chipped, its cord cut short. I hadn't taken it. I hadn't touched it. But there it was. When I plugged it into my radio out of pure disbelief, the channel lit up green for a split second. Then came the same voice, faint, almost peaceful this time. "Thanks for stopping." The mic went dead. To this day, I keep it in my glove box. Sometimes, on foggy nights, it hums, just a low, cold vibration that fades as soon as I touch it. And every year, near the end of October, Channel 19 comes alive again, the same voice, the same words, still asking for help on a road where no truck has driven for decades. The end. The motel behind the rest stop. It happened in September of 2015, on Highway 64 outside Flagstaff, Arizona. I'd been hauling medical equipment from Phoenix up toward Utah, driving through the night to beat a deadline. The desert was quiet, no cars, no lights, nothing but the wind and the hum of the tires. By 2:30 a.m., I was exhausted. The caffeine had worn off hours ago, and my eyelids felt like lead. When I saw a sign for a rest stop ahead, I took it without thinking. The exit curved into a small lot surrounded by scrub and sand. Two dim lamps flickered near the entrance, and beyond them, I could make out the outline of a small building, a motel, or maybe a diner. The kind of old roadside stop you barely notice in daylight. A faded sign leaned crooked over the gravel lot, Pine Ridge Motel, vacancy. The place looked deserted, but there was a faint glow behind the front windows. I parked the rig, shut off the engine, and sat for a minute in silence. The air outside was still, unnaturally still. Not even crickets. I told myself I'd just grab a few hours of sleep inside before heading north. When I stepped out, the gravel crunched under my boots like it hadn't been walked on in years. The motel office door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled of dust and something faintly sweet, like old perfume. A bell sat on the counter, its brass tarnished. I rang it once. The sound echoed too long, like it was bouncing through an empty hall. After a few seconds, a woman appeared from the back room. She was older, thin, her gray hair pulled into a bun, wearing a faded uniform that looked decades out of style. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Late night, dear?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I said. "Just need a room till morning." She nodded and turned the ledger toward me. The paper looked yellowed, the ink faded. I signed my name, though the pen barely worked. She slid a key across the counter, an actual brass key, heavy, with the number 7 carved into it. "Room 7's down the right," she said. "Quiet one. You'll rest easy." I thanked her and stepped back outside. The corridor lights flickered, buzzing faintly. I walked down to the last door on the right. Room 7. The lock turned stiffly. Inside, the air was stale and cold. The furniture was old, floral bedspread, wooden chair, small lamp on the table. The wallpaper was peeling in places. I dropped my bag, kicked off my boots, and sat on the edge of the bed. For the first time all night, I let myself relax. Then I noticed the picture on the wall, a black and white photograph of the same motel. The sign, the layout, everything was identical, except it looked newer, untouched. There were 2 people standing near the door in the picture, a man and a woman, smiling. The woman looked exactly like the clerk. Something about that made my stomach twist. I tried the TV, but it didn't turn on. No hum, no static. I decided to sleep anyway. The sheets were cold, too cold for the desert night. I turned on the lamp, just to keep some light in the room, and drifted off. Sometime after 3 a.m., I woke up. The light was flickering. For a second, I couldn't tell what had pulled me from sleep. Then I heard it, a soft thud, like footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Dragging. I sat up, pulse pounding. The sound moved past my door, paused, then faded away. I waited a full minute before standing. The peephole showed nothing but darkness. I turned back toward the bed, and froze. The photograph on the wall was different. The 2 people were gone. The motel still stood, but its windows were shattered, the sign half missing. The picture frame rattled once, like something behind it had moved. My throat went dry. I grabbed my bag, ready to leave, but when I opened the door, the hallway wasn't there. Instead, I was staring out at open desert, flat, endless, no lights, no road. The air smelled like smoke. I stumbled back inside, slammed the door, heart hammering. The lamp went out. In the reflection of the window, I saw movement behind me, a faint shape standing near the bathroom door. A voice whispered, low and close, "You shouldn't be here." I spun around, flashlight in hand. The room was empty. But the door key on the table was gone. I ran out, not looking back. The corridor was lit again, pale and flickering. I sprinted to the office, half expecting it to be locked, but it wasn't. The counter was empty, the chair overturned. The ledger I'd signed was gone. The only thing left was the brass key, lying in the center of the desk. I didn't stop to think. I bolted for my truck and hit the road. The motel vanished behind me faster than I could process. The desert stretched on, quiet and empty again. By sunrise, I reached a diner outside Winslow. I told the owner what I'd seen. He frowned, shook his head slowly. "You sure about the name? Pine Ridge Motel?" "Yeah," I said. He looked uneasy. That place burned down in '93. Gas leak in the office. Killed the couple that owned it, man and wife. They say some nights you still see the lights, but there hasn't been a building there for 20 years. I didn't believe him. I drove back that afternoon. Same rest stop, same curve, but beyond the gravel lot, there was nothing. Just the remains of a concrete foundation and charred timbers buried in sand. On impulse, I walked toward it. The air grew colder with every step. Near where the office should have been, something half-buried caught the light. I brushed the sand away, an old brass key, tarnished, with the number 7 engraved deep into the metal. I didn't touch it. I left it there and walked back to the truck, my hands shaking. That night, while fueling up near Gallup, I opened my glove compartment and froze. Lying inside, covered in dust, was the same brass key. Room 7. I threw it out at the next stop. The next morning, it was back. The end. The child on the road. It happened in January of 2020, on a long, empty stretch of Highway 50 in Nevada. The locals call it the loneliest road in America, and that night, it lived up to the name. I was hauling machinery east from Carson City to Ely, the temperature hovering around 20 degrees, snow patching the shoulders of the road. It was close to 3 a.m., and I hadn't seen another set of headlights for more than an hour. The only light came from the high beams slicing through the darkness and the pale wash of the moon above the desert. My radio had gone silent, my phone had no signal, and fatigue was setting in heavy. I remember thinking I'd pull over at the next rest area, but then I saw something that froze the breath in my chest. A child was standing in the middle of the road. Small, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing a white shirt and jeans, barefoot. The figure was perfectly still, arms hanging loosely at the sides, head slightly tilted. I hit the brakes, the trailer jolting behind me, tires squealing against the asphalt. The truck came to a full stop barely 10 yards away. My heart was pounding. I leaned forward, trying to see clearly through the windshield. The kid didn't move. Not an inch. I flicked my high beams twice. Nothing. I rolled the window down and called out, "Hey! You okay?" The air that came in was freezing, sharp enough to sting my lungs. There was no response. Just silence, no wind, no crickets, nothing. I climbed down from the cab, flashlight in hand, boots crunching on gravel as I walked toward the figure. The beam caught the edges of the shirt, too clean, too bright for a child supposedly stranded in the desert at night. When I was about 10 feet away, I stopped. Something felt wrong. The ground around the kid was undisturbed, no footprints in the dust, no tire marks, nothing to show how they'd gotten there. I said again, "Are you hurt?" The head twitched slightly, just once, and that single movement made my stomach twist. It wasn't natural, too fast, like a puppet pulled by a string. I took a step back. My flashlight flickered, then went out completely. In the second it took for my eyes to adjust, the child was gone. I spun around, heart hammering, sweeping the dark with the useless beam. Nothing. Just the empty road stretching for miles. Then I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, a small wooden cross on the side of the highway, about 20 feet ahead, half buried in the sand. A faded teddy bear hung from it, its fur gray and stiff. I stood there, staring, cold creeping up my spine. I hurried back to the cab, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking as I turned the key, but before I could shift into gear, the truck's headlights dimmed on their own, flickered twice, and then went black. For a full minute, I sat there in total darkness. Then, faintly, through the silence, I heard it, a laugh. A child's laugh, soft and distant, drifting through the cold air. I froze, trying to tell where it came from, but it was everywhere, around me, inside the cab, echoing faintly like it was coming through the radio speakers. I slammed the headlights back on. They flickered to life, and there, reflected in the glass of the windshield, was a small handprint. 5 perfect prints, pressed from the inside of the cab. That's when I floored it. I didn't look back until I saw the glow of Ely's city lights an hour later. I parked at the first gas station I saw and sat there until sunrise, hands still gripping the wheel, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. The attendant noticed I looked pale and asked if I was all right. I told him what I'd seen, a child standing in the road near mile marker 237. His expression changed immediately. "You're not the first," he said quietly. "Happened back in the 90s. Family's car broke down there during a snowstorm. Father went to get help. When he came back, the kid had wandered onto the road. Truck didn't see him. I asked if the boy survived. The attendant shook his head. They put that cross up for him. Every winter someone says they see him again." I didn't say another word. I filled up the tank and left. A few days later, I checked my dash camera footage. The video showed me braking, getting out of the cab, then standing still for about 30 seconds. No sign of a child. But when I looked closer, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. At the exact moment my flashlight went out, a faint white shape flickered across the edge of the frame. Small. Human-shaped. The footage cut out right after. I deleted the video that same night, but I never forgot that sound, the laugh echoing through the radio, the faint handprint on the glass. Since then, I've driven that road maybe a dozen times, always during daylight. I don't touch Highway 50 after dark anymore. But last winter, during another long haul, I got caught in a snowstorm near Fallon. The road blurred white in front of me, and as I slowed to keep control, the radio came alive with static. For a moment, through the noise, I could have sworn I heard a child's voice whisper, almost playfully. "You stopped last time." Then silence. I didn't speak. I didn't turn the radio off. I just drove on until morning. The end. The final mile. It happened in November of 2018, somewhere along Interstate 70 in eastern Colorado. I'd been running overnight freight from Denver to Kansas City, long, flat miles through endless plains. The weather was clear, no wind, no snow, just a cold dry stretch of highway beneath a dark sky. I'd made the trip hundreds of times before. Nothing about that night should have been different. It was just after 2 a.m. when my phone buzzed in the cup holder. No signal, no service, but somehow a call came through anyway. The screen said dispatch. I answered out of habit. "Tom," the voice said. My heart skipped. I recognized that voice. It was Bill, my dispatcher, or at least it sounded exactly like him. But that couldn't be possible. Bill had died the week before from a heart attack. I'd been at his funeral 2 days earlier. I froze. "Who is this?" There was a long pause. "Finish the run," the voice said. "Deliver, then go home." The line went dead. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I told myself it was some sick prank, maybe another driver on the CB trying to mess with me. But when I checked the call log, it showed the same number I used to get dispatch updates from. I drove on, trying to ignore the feeling crawling up my spine. Around mile marker 312, the air in the cab grew colder. The heater was still blowing, but my breath fogged in front of me. I adjusted the vents, glanced at the side mirror, and nearly swerved off the road. Someone was sitting in the passenger seat. A man, wearing a dark jacket and cap, staring straight ahead. His skin was pale, almost gray in the dashboard light. I didn't need to look twice to know the face. It was Bill. I slammed the brakes. The rig shuddered, trailer groaning. The man didn't move. He just said, calmly, "You're almost there." My throat went dry. "You're dead," I whispered. He turned slowly toward me, eyes black in the half-light. "Not yet," he said. "But you will be, if you stop." Then he was gone. The seat was empty. The air warmed again. My hands trembled as I shifted back into gear and forced myself to keep driving. For the next hour, nothing happened. The sky began to lighten at the edges, that dull gray that comes before dawn. I started to believe I'd hallucinated the whole thing. Then my GPS pinged, a route update. The screen flickered and displayed a destination I hadn't entered, final drop, Route 1. There was no address, just coordinates. They pointed 20 miles off the main road, into farmland. Against my better judgment, I followed. The road narrowed, gravel crunching beneath the tires, until I came to a stop at the end of a dirt path. A single wooden sign stood there, half-rotted, Miller's Storage Depot. The building beyond it was small and dark, no lights, no signs of life. But the coordinates matched. I parked, climbed out, and called into the cold air, "Anyone here?" No answer. The wind picked up, rattling the siding. Then I heard it, faint, inside the building, the sound of a CB radio crackling to life. I stepped closer. "Tom," the voice said again. "You made it." My heart pounded in my ears. "Who is this?" No reply. The radio hissed softly. I walked inside. The place was empty except for an old wooden desk and a single metal chair. On the desk sat a dusty CB radio, mic hanging by its cord. The green power light was on. I picked it up. "Bill?" Static. Then a whisper, so faint I almost missed it, "You finished my run." The radio went silent. I turned to leave, and froze. Through the cracked window, I could see my truck. But someone was sitting in the driver's seat. I ran outside. The cab light was on. The figure turned its head toward me, and I saw my own face staring back, pale, eyes hollow, hands gripping the wheel. I stumbled backward, breath catching, and the lights of the truck flickered. The engine roared to life on its own. Headlights flared, blinding me. When I blinked, the cab was empty again. I climbed in, shaking. The dashboard clock read 3:33 a.m. The GPS screen was blank. The delivery manifest on the seat beside me had changed, the destination line now read, "Delivered." But the cargo in the trailer was untouched. I drove straight to the nearest truck stop in Limon and called the main office. The dispatcher on duty, a woman I'd never met, checked my record. "That run's not on the board," she said. "You weren't assigned anything last night. We don't even have that route." I told her about the call. She went quiet, then said, "Sir, that number's been out of service since Bill passed. We shut it down after the funeral." I hung up without replying. Later, as dawn broke, I walked around my truck one last time. Everything looked normal until I reached the back doors. In the frost covering the metal, someone had drawn a single line with their finger, "Final mile complete." I wiped it off, started the engine, and didn't stop until I hit Kansas. To this day, I don't take calls on the road after midnight. The number that called me still appears in my phone log sometimes, marked dispatch, unknown. Every time I delete it, it comes back. Always the same timestamp, 2 a.m. And every year, on the week of Bill's death, my GPS tries to reroute me back to that same set of coordinates. The end.